What's up, YouTube? This is Quan, the Urban Sportsman, and I just wanted to give you guys a quick Marabou jig tutorial. Just to start, the Marabou jig is probably the most used crappie jig ever, to be quite honest. And as a result, I want to start out with just this simple tutorial. So first, you grab your bobbin and your thread. You're going to wrap your thread along your hook shank over itself, all the way down to the back. Once you get so far down, you can just simply cut that tag end off. All right, after you cut that tagging off, you're going to grab your next material, which is your Marabou. Whatever color you feel like you want to use for your jig, go ahead and grab your Marabou. Once you have your Marabou, you want to measure it out. Pretty much measuring it to the end of your hook shank from the head. That's a good length to start with. Use your two fingers, pinch it together on top of your hook shank, just in front of the point of your hook is where you want to do this. And go ahead and wrap that in all the way up until the head of your jig. Once you're done wrapping it into the head, go ahead and cut that Marabou off, that tag end, and wrap back. And that's where you're going to smooth it out for your next thing that you're going to wrap in. Your next thing is going to be Flashable. Flashable, that's something you can play with however much you want to put in there or how little you want to put. A lot of people don't really put a lot in, but for me, I use about 3 strands. There's your flash. What I'm going to do is cut that to about twice the length of my jig. That's including the tail of Marabou. And then I'm going to tie in one side of it in particular to wrap that up probably about, I'll say halfway up the hook shank. And then I'm going to turn that and flip it and go back down the hook shank with my thread wraps just to get that flashable on both sides and then cut my tag end off. Alright, the next material you're going to use is going to be chenille. Chenille, you want to go ahead and pull off some of the actual fabric from the chenille and leave just that little bit of a thread piece. I don't know if you can see it well that way right there, but that's what you're going to tie in. It's actually a little bit easier to tie it in that way. So go ahead and wrap that thread up to the tip and just leave it there. And then from there, what you'll notice that I'm doing two things. I'm actually wrapping the chenille in the opposite direction of what my actual thread wraps were. That way when I tie it in, I'm going against the grain with that. Another thing you'll notice right here is that I'm pulling the actual fabric of the chenille back in a couple of instances just to make sure that stuff goes on pretty smooth and not all bunching and bumpy. And the last thing is I do is I actually wrap it around one last time, which you see here, just to get a good snug wrap. And then I go ahead and tie it in with about 4 or 5 thread wraps. Once I get those 4 or 5 in, I go ahead and clip my tag end off, and I'm pretty much done with my jig with the exception of one last or two things. The first thing I want to do is I grab my whip finisher tool, which is this guy right here, and I go ahead and do about 3 whip finishes on all of my jigs just to make sure they're tied in there snug. You see me with the whip finisher tool. If you don't know how to use one of these, there are tutorials online where you can learn how to use them. They're pretty simple, but they're a lifesaver when it comes into tying in your jigs. So that's my first knot. There's my second knot. And then after my third knot, what you'll find I do is I actually kind of snug it in there, but don't snug too tight because it'll cause your materials to spin. Now once I have that all done, I'm going to cut my thread off. Once my thread is cut down, I'm going to the last step, and that's to grab my Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails. I'm using this specifically on my thread just to harden that up so it lasts longer and I don't have to worry about it getting beat up if I catch something with some teeth like a pike or a pickerel. I don't have to worry about my knots coming loose. One thing I do with this Sally Hansen Hard as Nails, I use a straightened out paper clip or any small piece of metal, and I just dip it in there and I go around my thread that way to go ahead and let that liquid just soak into my thread. And once it's soaking in, you'll notice that it really keeps those knots really well. It's one of those things, it's cheap. It's $3 for a whole thing that'll get me easily 50 or 60 jigs with no problems. Once that's done, I let it dry and I'm done with my jig. That's the beauty of this particular tie, is that they're simple and they catch fish, man. This one in particular is a 1/32 ounce. It's pretty small, but that's about the smallest I fish with for crappie or any type of panfish, but they work. Here it is one last time. Thanks again for watching. Please like and subscribe.